It is a gloomy, rainy morning on the road south to Saigon. The way it looks outside sparks a memory inside for B.T. Collins.
It's funny, I came in the rain and I left in the rain.
B.T. Collins first arrived in Vietnam in 1965. He left 19 months later on a stretcher with all the memories.
So you walk in the monsoon for not days on end, but weeks on end. You cannot imagine what it's like. It's incessant, never ending.
B.T. Collins has taken a roundabout way to get back here. At first, a painful way, losing an arm and a leg after a grenade explosion ripped him apart 20 years ago during a battle in Vietnam's Delta. In the 70s, life got normal as Collins went back to school and got a law degree. Then it became anything but normal. B.T. Collins went to work for Democrat Governor Jerry Brown. They were the odd couple of California politics, the almost shy liberal governor, and at his right hand, a brash and outspoken Republican who never seemed to take his new job, his boss, or himself very seriously.
I am terrified. I never had so many things hit me once. I'm exhausted, and I want my mother.
But Collins distinguished himself during that time as director of one of the governor's pet projects, the CCC, the California Conservation Corps. He took kids from different backgrounds, good kids, bad kids, and gave them all purpose. He was Captain Collins again, running the CCC like a military unit, demanding responsibility and discipline.
There are two words that I don't ever want to hear from a Corps member, and that is can't and never. You could always figure out a way to do it.
And they did. The CCC has become a model for similar programs in 39 other states and 15 countries.
Can we talk about the calendar?
Yeah.
For Wednesday.
Life after the state capitol for B.T. Collins gets very different. Surrounded by the images of his past, he is now a vice president of a major Wall Street investment banking and brokerage firm. And things slow down enough to let him take a vacation. And so he finds himself in an airport in Bangkok, Thailand, holding a round-trip ticket to Vietnam. Once there, just like the old days in California politics, B.T. Collins will again be the focus of public attention and affection. The tall American with the limp and the hook for a hand to the kids of Vietnam is like a Pied Piper.
We lost it like Liberation of Saigon in 75.
75?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And to dozens of other war amputees he will meet, he is a marvel of medical science. His state-of-the-art arm and hydraulic leg are a source of amazement for disabled veterans whose country has not been able to provide them with such post-war assistance. Like the amputee who seemed embarrassed, who walked away from us, not wanting us to see that he was, after all these years, still using as a leg the casing of an old artillery shell.
I will always remember, can't believe how this affects me so many years later.
Vietnam bears memories of suffering for Brian Collins, too. But he has decided to come back, taking his first vacation in 11 years. It is for him a ritual of completion, to reaffirm something he has been driven by for 20 years, that his military service here was the most important thing he's ever done. An acknowledgement that for those around him has been a long time in coming.
I got a letter from a woman who's 26 years old. She did a story on me in the Wall Street Journal when she was 22. And she saw Platoon, and she just, said thanks. My own family. It took them years to do that. My own family. I mean, and who would care more about you than your own family?
Hanoi, the seat of power of our enemy in the 60s and the 70s. Today, not a very threatening place. It is a city in the Soviet style, gray and joyless, a city dogged by decay and neglect. Its overriding character is its people, still isolated from the West, but proud and resolute. That isolation has cut the Vietnamese off from experiences with outsiders, so accomplishing tasks easy in America become monumental in Vietnam.
We've got to do something about it right here.
At the Foreign Press Center in Hanoi, we find partners in our desire to travel Vietnam and see what we want to see. Our keepers, or minders, are going to be the press officers. Like the diplomatic corps, they are widely traveled. They deal regularly with foreign visitors. Mercifully, they are worldly enough to not spend their time trying to feed us the party line. Besides, they're going to be busy trying to get B.T. Collins to all the places he wants to go, to all of his old haunts.
Yeah. Talk to the people there, and they will take you to Hanoi. It means that it takes about 3 days.
Too long. We don't have the time. We decide to invest the major effort getting to Long Thuan in the Delta, the scene of Collins's last battle, the place where he was wounded.
I understand the importance of Long Thuan. Let us work out and talk to people who might know something about the area and to find out whether it would be accessible to get there. We try to see if it is possible, but your program has got to be very flexible.
Our keepers are worried, not just because of accessibility, but because of local politicians. The Southerners, they confess, are still independent. They don't always do things, just because Hanoi says so. The scars of the war in Vietnam's capital have been erased, save one. A B-52 bomber still rests, impaled in a fish pond in a suburb of Hanoi. B.T. Collins wonders about the obvious.
My countrymen were in that plane. And, I wonder what happened to them. And now the Vietnamese who lived in that neighborhood made a big deal to point out to me that none of the Americans, to the best of their knowledge, were killed. They all had parachutes. But still, I live next to an Air Force base where B-52s fly out of, and I always think of them as invincible. And here's this great iron bird that's crashed.
Collins will see the broken parts of another B-52 at the Vietnam War Museum in Hanoi. The remains are stacked up alongside those of an F-111 fighter bomber. Perched atop the display, as though in a triumphant pose, is a Soviet-made MiG-21 of the North Vietnamese Air Force.
It is tough to see stuff that was your country's and to see it in the hands of the enemy. I mean, we used to pride ourselves when we captured weapons and things like that. Now I know how they must have felt.
Walking Collins through the museum is Colonel Bui Tin, an editor, journalist, and old soldier. It was he who took the surrender from the South at the presidential palace in Saigon on that day in April 1975, when it was all over. Colonel Tin was also a guide for another American when she visited North Vietnam during the war, actress Jane Fonda. In acting out her protest against the war, she demonstrated solidarity with the enemy in some now famous television news footage.
That visit and the support it showed for Vietnam had great impact on the thinking of the Vietnamese people. We realized there were two Americans, one who dropped bombs on us and another who supported us, who had sympathy for our struggle for independence and freedom.
But for American pilots who'd been shot down, and for B.T. Collins, Jane Fonda's visit to Hanoi and the protests at home, often led by Tom Hayden, now her husband, are acts that are seen in a different way.
Their greatest sin is that by mere presence and by her sitting in an anti-aircraft gun seat, they said to the North Vietnamese, you can do whatever you want with those pilots. Because the Vietnamese felt that if you were a movie actress, you represented not a fringe element of America, you were America. So what the Fonda and Hayden did, and their ilk, was that they gave, and they probably didn't even realize they were doing it, they gave their blessing as Americans for the torture that went on and on and on of the American prisoners of war.
Another monument Collins will see is the mausoleum where Ho Chi Minh rests in state, preserved under glass. The faithful queue up day after day by the hundreds to see the man they consider their liberator, Uncle Ho.
It was amazing the reverence they held for this man, but not unexpected. I, of course, did not have the tactlessness to ask if they knew how many landlords he had put to death, even in his own province. He's a ruthless man, but, you know, just like Lenin and Stalin and Mao, the Communist Society seems to have a great reverence and a facility for preserving a personality cult which their very doctrine is totally against.
For our trip south, we're supposed to get 2 vans. The morning of our departure, the minders show up with 1 van and 1 1980 Russian-built Volga, not the hallmark of dependability. We have 21 pieces of equipment and baggage, but the vehicles already are weighed down with spare tires and drums of gasoline. For 1,500 miles, we will be a rolling bomb.
Some things just don't change after 20 years. There's something about the Vietnamese. They do not respect the law of physics. I mean, if there is a space to be filled, then you must fill it with whatever amount of junk, and so something's going to break. I mean, the pressure on the axles. Plus, they were smoking. I got a kick out of that. You got all the gasoline fumes in the car, and they're smoking. You know, and I got this heart problem. I'm not supposed to get excited at that. Just suck on another aspirin or something. I mean, but this trip is going nowhere. I mean, we're not even going to get into South Vietnam.
Wait. As we drive out of Hanoi, we sneak a shot of the infamous Hanoi Hilton, the prison for American POWs. In a way, we feel imprisoned too, locked up with some uncomfortable Vietnamese realities, riding on roads that are absolutely death-defying, that should be 1 lane rather than 2, and driving in an explosion waiting to happen. As we begin to drive south on Highway 1, leaving Hanoi, we pass through Vinh, a city with the distinction of being the most bombed during the war. Then south through Hue, where the Tet Offensive of 1968 would be forevermore etched on the American consciousness. Next to Da Nang, the huge U.S. base, and the Marine Enclave at Chu Lai. Then for B.T. Collins, a sentimental but not all too successful trip into the Central Highlands and An Khê. Back on Highway 1, we travel through Quy Nhon and Nha Trang, then into the mountains and to the famous old resort at Dalat. 7 days and 1,500 miles after leaving Hanoi, we reach Saigon, today Ho Chi Minh City. Then later, we travel farther south into the Delta to Long Thuan, in what used to be called Vinh Binh Province, to the very spot where B.T. Collins' military career and almost his life came to an end. Over 3 weeks' time in Vietnam, we will cover 2,000 miles on roads, streets, and highways fit neither for man nor beast. The only danger that one risks in traveling in Vietnam in the 80s is the traveling. The roads are murderous. Army trucks are the culprits. Soldiers in Vietnam are not trained to drive carefully, so they don't. They know that if something happens, the Army will take care of it, so they drive with a sense of abandon. Mix narrow roads with a constant flow of pedestrians, bicycles, carts, and water buffalo, with trucks and vehicles rocketing along at any speed desired, and you get the idea. Driving south from Hanoi, these days there are no signs of the punishment the North took from massive U.S. bombing raids. Like the Ham Rong Bridge across the Horse River, it was an important north-south link for the North Vietnamese. For 2.5 years, it was the target of 700 U.S. airstrikes. Attacking it was the ultimate danger. 8 American planes were lost. Coming in over the town of Trang Hoa, pilots had to run a gauntlet between two hills on both ends of the bridge, the hills bristling with anti-aircraft guns. Quang Tri, heading south, is the first graphic sign of the past. There was a battle here in 1972 between North and South. It lasted 82 days, and it leveled Quang Tri.
It was a fierce battle, and then you see that school. It was the only building left standing, so they had some sense of history to do that.
In our history, the 10 years of fighting in Vietnam make it our longest war. But we are a young nation. Vietnam is thousands of years old. The American experience is just a blip in their history. But the importance the government attaches to that war is evident all across the country, in cities and villages. There are hundreds of monuments and cemeteries called Patriot Memorials, the last hurrah for soldiers and civilians who died fighting for the communists. The most spectacular monument we saw is on a hill in central Vietnam, overlooking Chu Lai. It is not hard to guess who its artist, or at least its sponsor, was. It looks more Soviet than Vietnamese. The U.S. Marines were here. The hangars they built remain, now serving a different master. May 1965. The NVA, the soldiers of North Vietnam, were in the mountains behind Chu Lai. Both sides met and battled in what would be America's first offensive action of the war, Operation Starlight.
The commitment of American ground troops, conventional forces, never stopped after that, never looked back. And I remember I was in the middle of a revolution in Santo Domingo with the 82nd Airborne, and I was absolutely terrified that this war would be over before I got there. Many years later, I was visiting hospitals in Japan. I was in law school, and I used to spend my summers traveling, and I held the hand of a 18-year-old. And his legs had been guillotine cut by the surgeons. You know, they'd lost both of them in a mine thing. And I held his hands while they were doing a dressing change because I knew how painful this was going to be, and I told him to keep looking at me and just to answer every question I had, because I'd been through this before. And just hold on to my hand and just scream at me, but the doctor's got to do what he's got to do. And the last question I asked him was, how old are you? He said, I'm 18. In 1965, he was 12 when I first went. And then I knew this war had been going on a long time.
The Perfume River flows through the city of Vietnam's ancient history, Hue, the imperial capital of the emperors and kings. For 25 days in 1968, at Tet, the Chinese New Year, the smell in this city wasn't of the river. It was of gunpowder and death. B.T. Collins was watching the ferocity of the battle for Hue on television, recovering from his own wounds in a U.S. Army hospital.
They were here.
Now we were talking about it, in front of the enemy's command post, the Temple of Supreme Harmony.
The friends of mine who fought here, that I met later on, it was like house-to-house stuff. I mean, and they'd no sooner clean out a pocket of them than they'd be behind him. And of course, the North Vietnamese were going to fight to the death. There was no question about that. Their backs were against the walls. The tragedy, of course, of it is that once it was all over, we eventually left, but a lot of Marines blood right here, right here.
150 young Americans, 400 South Vietnamese soldiers, and 6,000 civilians were killed. However, the toll included 5,000 communist troops. The battle was a victory for the U.S., but its timing broke the political back of an American president, Lyndon Johnson.
The kill ratio was incredible, absolutely incredible. And it would have taken them many years to prepare for another Tet. If we had pursued, whenever you destroy the enemy, you must pursue that, and we were stopped cold. The Americans just couldn't take that tremendous number of casualties all in one bunch. American mothers just couldn't take it anymore.
Won it here and lost it in Washington.
I believe so. I'm an old soldier, but I believe it. John F. Kennedy said, we'll bear any burden and we'll pay any price. After 1968, we said, well, maybe. I think we'll hedge our bets.
Between Hue and Da Nang, as you drive through the northern reaches of the U.S. military presence in Vietnam, what begins to show up are the telltale signs of America. In villages near former U.S. bases, houses have been built of flattened fuel drums and corrugated tin. We will cross over dozens of U.S. Army Bailey bridges. What for our military was a quick-fix temporary measure, for Vietnam is in place permanently. And vehicles, made in Detroit, stuck in Vietnam forever. Thousands of them in the South. Ambulances that have become buses. Army engineer heavy equipment trucks and jeeps. The best of America's rolling stock, still running. The odometers still turning, over and over and over. The south of Vietnam is still like a different country. Da Nang shows the first signs of thriving enterprise we've seen. It is a long way, culturally and commercially, from Hanoi.
The streets are much more crowded, if that's possible, and there's just a lot more stuff to buy, and a lot more Honda motorcycles, brand new Honda motorcycles, right out of the packing crates.
Near the beach, overlooking barren squares of ground that were once U.S. encampments, is Marble Mountain. As a religious shrine, it was off limits to GIs and Marines, with good reason. For 18 months, the shrine in reality was a hospital and a base, owned and operated secretly by the Viet Cong.
It just points out to their stick-to-itness and their perseverance to operate. I mean, it is literally within eyesight of one of the largest bases that Americans operated in the northern part of southern Vietnam. I mean, you can spit at it. Although not surprising when you think about the 281 miles of tunnels around Cu Chi and under the headquarters of the 25th Division.
Cu Chi is near Saigon, and it has a history underneath it that tells volumes about the Vietnamese. For 31 years, they burrowed underground, first fighting against the French and then the Americans. If you took all of the tunnels of Cu Chi and you laid them end to end, they would stretch from Sacramento to San Francisco and back again. And even then, extend another 30 miles. As the network of tunnels grew, they became for tens of thousands of fighters, both defensive hideaways and offensive bases, even reaching underneath the headquarters base of the U.S. 25th Infantry Division. So 165 square miles were cleared and leveled by the American military, with bulldozers and bombing. Hundreds must have died underground. But still, until the war ended in 1975, the enemy actively used the tunnels of Cu Chi. The sights to see in Quy Nhon are at the seaside, another of Vietnam's beautiful beaches, graced by world champion-sized fish nets. The fishermen sit in their little outposts, foot-pedaling the controls of their nets, lifting them up to check the catch and then dropping them back in the water to capture more. And the fish of Quy Nhon have a couple of hiding places. U.S. Army tanks, which South Vietnamese crews drove into the surf as the country fell in 1975. The tank crews then abandoned ship and swam away. But what we'll remember best about Quy Nhon is Mr. Hugh, the local official who was our unwilling host. We began to get the idea as he shooed away young amputees who had come to see B.T. Collins. They weren't old enough to be Vietnam War vets. They clearly were veterans of the current war in Cambodia. Mr. Hugh apparently felt politically uncomfortable about that, so he told them to go away. In 1965, during his first tour in Vietnam, Collins served with the 1st Cavalry Division in An Khê, in the highlands above Quy Nhon. It was for Collins an important time, and now an important memory. He wanted to go back there, he told our official keepers at the Foreign Press Office in Hanoi.
Yeah, talk to the people there, and they'll take you to...
They say, no problem. As we left Quy Nhon, headed into the mountains in An Khê, we sensed a problem with the tense Mr. Hugh. He wanted nothing to do with this. On the way down from Hanoi, other than a string of flat tires, the Japanese van and the Russian car had served us amazingly well. But now, one of the drivers, on orders from Mr. Hugh, we think, begins to fake car problems. B.T. Collins looks like he's ready to start the next Vietnam War. Mr. Hugh, meantime, is busy shooing more people away. In all our time in Vietnam, no one ever tried to keep others away from us. Mr. Hugh was our only Vietnamese grouch. Against all the resistance, though, we finally rolled into An Khê. But then local officials there turn us away. We'll never know what the problem was, but we go down the road and take some more pictures anyway. With the hill Collins lived on in the background, he remembers.
The men of Bravo Company were nothing like the people you saw in the Platoon movie. They were so far removed from that type of an atmosphere. It was like night and day. The movie Platoon, it didn't show the incredible love that these GIs had for each other. It all happened right over there. And I will always remember, I can't believe how this affects me so many years later. I will always remember the men of Bravo Company, and when I got ready to leave from a mountaintop way far away in a monsoon, you know, and I knew that my year was up and I had to leave. I stayed longer than anybody else, and they all stood there in the rain and saluted me as I left.
Now, back on the road to Ho Chi Minh City, we're worried. If getting to Collins' destination near An Khê has been thwarted, what will happen when we try to get to his other location, in a remote swamp in the Delta? BT goes mute for 2 days. We are frustrated and angry.
Well, all I'm saying is, you know, if you really want GIs to come back, the military is going to have to be more cooperative with the tourist office or the press office, whoever is dealing with the former GIs. Otherwise, it's a waste of everybody's time. It's a waste of your time and my time, and our money too, by the way. To bring them all the way here, telling them that they're going to be able to go freely to the places where they were, and expect them just to go on the tourist route and not be able to go see areas that are outside of the cities and towns where they were based. And that's what you're doing, and that's why it's a big disappointment, and it's dishonest.
No, nothing about all this. We are not lying or anyone. You see, this is the question. I try to do myself.
I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying you're not telling us the whole situation.
That is the what is it?
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Another beach city goes by, Nha Trang. We see one of the world's largest sitting Buddhas. Around it are the signs of a vicious battle between the South and the North in 1968. The old American air base here has a new look. It is not comfortable watching Soviet-built MiG-23s rehearsing landings and takeoffs, doing their touch-and-goes off of what was a U.S. runway not so long ago. Then there's the lot, frozen in Vietnam's past. Spared during the war, it was and is the country's leading resort. High in the mountains, the old French mansions are now People's Committee offices and political education schools. But the old taxi cabs, 1946 Peugeots, are still hauling fares. Finally, a week out of Hanoi, we reach Ho Chi Minh City. In spite of the communist victory, most people still call it Saigon. The presidential palace is virtually unused now, and like so much else in the country, aching under the strains of neglect and decay. The only life it sees now is as a conference hall, a place for important meetings. And officials also enjoy showing it off to Western visitors. B.T. Collins sits at the desk of the South's last president, Win Van Tu, and that brings back recollections of ineptness, corruption, and defeat.
How did we let it get so screwed up? I mean, our cause was just. Our methods sucked. And how did we pick such bozos for allies? I still think we did the right thing.
Outside Saigon, alongside a rubber plantation that belonged to Michelin before the communists, B.T. Collins visits a war cemetery. It is June 20th, 1987. To the day, 20 years after he almost lost his life in this country. And then he finds someone else who did. Same day, a year later.
This fellow was killed June 20th, 1968. Looks like he was born in Hanoi. It's a long way from home.
You were almost killed on June 20th yourself.
Today, yeah, 20 years ago. I was thinking about that this morning when I woke up.
The doctors told Collins back then that there was no clinical reason he should have survived, except for his will to live. So this is a day with some vivid memories.
I've never regretted one iota the events that led up to my almost leaving this world on June 20th. But I do know that there is June 20th, and it is a dividing point in my life. And the things, well, everything that happened before June 20th, 1967, really is of little or no consequence. Everything afterwards has been really good, really great. I mean, little things like learning to walk again. In the beginning, just for the pain to leave, to have my last operation, to walk again. That was a memorable thing.
With two of his limbs blown away, they brought B.T. Collins here, the 3rd Evacuation Hospital in Saigon, now a military recreation center. The helicopter carrying him had landed on the grass.
They sent me here to die, ironically. I can remember a veranda where they got me out of the intensive care unit because I couldn't stand the screaming, and I wanted a cigarette just as an excuse to get out because I couldn't move. Everything was strapped up, and I was being operated on every other day. They cut away more flesh and bone. I was so lonely. And when I think about it, I was so lonely and I was surrounded by Americans. What was it like for the POWs who had nobody? And I was just, it wasn't so much the pain as what did life hold for me? I mean, what was going to happen?
But as Brian Collins will put it, he got another shot at life. And it has all worked out. For the second time.
And it never, ever left me that I had that chance. And there are people that I remember to this day, and I will always remember them as 20 years old. See? And now I'm 46. And they never got a chance to be 46. They never got a chance to be 21. And they're in cemeteries like this in the United States.
South of Saigon now, in Kulong Province, we're finally getting closer to the Delta and what we came for. Mr. Tuan, the cultural and press officer of the province, is telling us that all is in readiness. We will be able to go to the place where B.T. Collins was almost killed 20 years ago.
On the way to Long Tuan, we were several
In fact, Mr. Tuan claims a bridge has been finished overnight so we can make the trip. And a former Viet Cong guerrilla who fought against Collins will be our guide.
I didn't believe it for one moment, but I was going to be polite. I just rolled my eyes gently towards the ceiling, and I thought it was more of their propaganda.
But by the time our meeting ends and we load our gear into 2 Russian Jeeps, the reality is beginning to get to Collins. Maybe this time there won't be any problems.
I cannot, in my wildest imagination, I can't believe this is happening. Normal people would not spend their first vacation in 11 years going back to the place where they got blown up at 130-degree heat. It's a big deal to them. I mean, the guy's telling me it's an honor you're coming to my province. I mean, maybe the shared sense of sacrifice, or the fact that I left some blood there, maybe that means something to them. I mean, all I did was spend 20 days there. They spent years there. Is that across something?
The bridge story turns out to be true, almost. They did build one, but it's still not finished.
I refuse to get discouraged.
This was all supposed to be done. Our guys are very upset. Some names and some heritage is taken in vain, and the workers spring into action.
This is amazing.
You know, it's this guy who caused all this commotion. He's a cook. Yeah, his fault.
Not true. I'm not a star. It's lack of religion and a high cholesterol diet that brings me here today, folks.
So henceforward, this piece of work, for us at least, will be known as the B.T. Collins Memorial Bridge.
Come on!
Hours later, we reach our destination, Long Thuan, a couple of miles off the South China Sea.
We are former enemy, but now we are friends and we can have a talk together.
And that evening, B.T. Collins meets Captain Sao Rong, Army of Vietnam. This place, where he was born and grew up fighting for the Viet Cong, is still his home.
All right, I need to know, is there a bunker complex right around here?
The two men look at Collins's old army map. The captain tells him he wasn't in that attack that night, but that he had known that Collins and his sergeant had been seriously wounded and that the Vietnamese radio operator had been killed. However, when Captain Rong describes an ambush he did fight in a week before and points out the place, Collins is impressed. The captain is for real.
That's amazing.
The next day, that's evident, as Captain Rong begins to take us to the old battleground, but not without some difficulty. We will travel an hour down a wide tributary of the Mekong River Delta. Watching the water, the shore, and the map, Captain Rong finally turns us into one of thousands of nameless, faceless canals. But then, it all begins to look familiar.
Oh yeah, I remember, because I had to cross. That's where I captured the sand. I was walking up till then. Then I came down here, and
alongside the river here.
Yeah, oh yeah, you hugged one bank. The bank that you knew was the safe bank. You kept a couple of people. That way the kids didn't have to carry their packs. See? And it was hot. Jesus, it was hot.
Captain Rong stops the boat. BT has arrived.
It was just this terrible mangrove stuff that you had to hack your way through. And if you went on a trail, of course, then the bad guys got you.
And they did. That night of the attack, a grenade explodes. The radio man dies instantly. Collins and his sergeant are both seriously wounded. The medic Thornburg is trying to save them. The images are rushing back now.
And I was dying, I remember, because, I was starting to go into deep shock. And I'd lost so much blood, I was sitting in it. It was hot. I remember how hot my blood was. And it just was running out of me. And he said, give the old man my morphine. We each carried one morphine. And it was a waste. I said, T-Berg, am I going to die? Am I going to die? And he said, no, you're not going to die. You're not going to die. I'm going to get you out of this. And he was lying through his teeth, which he admitted to me in 1968 when I left the Army and I drove cross country. I stopped there down at Fort Bragg in the Special Forces. I said, T-Berg, you lied to me. He said, no, I didn't. You're here.
Captain Rong tells Collins that the guerrillas found them here because of an airdrop his unit had gotten earlier. It was an uncomfortable bit of news, even 20 years later.
There's a rule, one of Roger's Rangers rules, never stay any place more than 24 hours. Now, it's true I hadn't been there 24 hours, but I was there too long, and I should have moved that night, but I guess it was just too hot, too tired. And, you know, if there's any what-if in my life, I mean, I can't second-guess this because I volunteered too many times for too many things, but if I could do that one thing over again, I would have moved.
But for the beat of the engine, it is a quiet trip back. The past is still pulsing through Collins's present. He had made it safely through one tour of duty in Vietnam back then and decided to re-up for another.
My mother, my second tour, she said, "Why do you have to go back?" And I said, "Because I'm pretty good at it, you know? And, you know, maybe I can save some lives." Because it wasn't, you know, that's what the business was, just staying alive for 364 days.
Our boat sneaks through a tiny canal back up to the place we started. We are all filled with a sense of accomplishment, having just done something you don't do in Vietnam these days. Everybody around here knows about the American with the hook and his quest. Word of his success has traveled fast. So his new fans give Brian Thomas Collins a standing O he'll never forget.
Tham, chuyến, muội. Tham, chuyến, muội. Are you? Muội.
8, 9, 10.
Tham, chuyến, muội.
For a moment now, we'd like you to hear from B.T. Collins and a couple of other veterans of Vietnam. Sergeant Linda McClenahan, she served a tour in Vietnam at Long Binh. She was in the Signal Corps and worked as a communications specialist, handling classified messages and counting the casualty reports. Next to her is Leo Thorsness. Leo was a major in the U.S. Air Force at the time he was shot down over North Vietnam. He had just 6 weeks before been nominated for the Medal of Honor, this country's highest military award for an act of heroism in the air. He didn't find out about that for 6 years because that he'd actually gotten the medal, because the next 6 years he spent in the infamous Hanoi Hilton, the prisoner of war prison in Hanoi, Vietnam, a prisoner of the North. He is he's also just recently served as technical advisor for the Hanoi Hilton, the motion picture about that unhappy place. And next to them, B.T. Collins. Would you want to do what B.T. did? Would you want to go back, Leo?
I would very much like to go back. It took me a long time to get to this point, but when I heard B.T. and you were going, I was envious because I saw Vietnam from the air for 92.5 missions and then from prison, but I really didn't see it from the ground, and I would like to see that city and that country now.
Actually, it was a former POW kind of broke the ice, wasn't it?
Yeah, John McCain went over there now, Senator McCain, and yeah, I would like very much to see it.
What about you, Linda?
I would like to go back as well. I was pretty isolated around the Long Binh, Benoit area, but I'd like a chance to go back and see not only the area that I did know, but to really get out and around and see more of the country when it's not in the middle of a war.
What would your expectations be? BT and I had lots of surprises on that trip, as I think you saw.
Well, I don't know that I would necessarily carry any expectations per se. I think I'd just like to see what it looks like and just have that experience under happier circumstances.
Linda McClenahan serves as the chairperson of the California Vietnam Veterans Memorial Commission, which is raising the money to build a permanent memorial on the grounds of the California State Capitol in Sacramento in the name of those who died in Vietnam. California sent more men and women to Vietnam to fight than any other state, and more of them stayed there, or rather were killed there, than any other state. BT, let's take a look at the memorial and describe for us what it's going to look like.
Right. The first thing you will notice is this young soldier sitting in this 60-foot diameter memorial that is encompassed by cherry trees and white roses. He's reading a letter, and you've interrupted him. And he signifies the youth, because we feel that 85% of these people were 19 or 20 years old when they were killed. They stopped growing before they stopped living. Here's one of the 4 tableaus where you have bronze friezes made up of classic Vietnam photographs. And this one exemplifies the camaraderie. That's actually taken from Khe Sanh. That's a Marine photo. This is how the names are going to look. They're going to be their name and their rank and their age. We really think that's going to be significant. And they will be listed alphabetically by town. So you'll be able to go to Bakersfield and then start looking for the names.
So this really will be a regional, statewide...
oh, yeah. We want it to be the best. I mean, California should set the example once again. We should have the classiest, the classical, the neatest memorial, I think.
Mm-hmm. There are 4 panels.
Right.
I noticed.
On the outside of the names. Outside of the names. And on the inside, one is dedicated to the BOWs, one is dedicated to the women, 38,000 women served in Vietnam, and one is for camaraderie, and one is for the actual combat scenes.
B.T. Collins is a member of the commission, and Leo Thorsness is the vice chairman of the commission. Leo, so how are you pulling this off? This thing costs money.
Well, we've raised, I guess, with in-kind and cash, about half of it, a little over $1 million. It's going to cost about $2 million total. And because of programs like this, we're getting a lot of help. And it was the best kept secret in a long time in California that there is a memorial. And by law, it's got to be through the private sector on the Capitol grounds. And there's 350,000 Vietnam veterans in California. If we all knew about it, we'd all kick in $6. But just getting the word out, but there's also 26 million Californians, so 2 million is a lot, but it's certainly doable, and we're going to get it done before too long.
So it's purely a project of the public of California, the people of California, and there's no other major contribution coming from government or anybody, right?
No.
It's all being done.
Although the city of Sacramento and the county of Sacramento are going to give us civic grants, $15,000 and $25,000 because of the tourist value that it brings to the city.
Leo mentioned in-kind donations, Linda. What does that mean?
Well, for the actual construction itself, we have had offers from all kinds of people around the area, and the excavation has been donated, the rebar, the concrete, a lot of the landscaping, and a lot of the construction machinery is being donated as well, and that's all, of course, going to be very helpful.
But it's all of the artwork, the friezes, the bronze work that is very expensive, and that's what most of the money is going to be raised for. Let's look at some of the artwork that's going to appear on those panels, those 4 panels around the interior.
This would be one that would show a Marine patrol and the fatigue and the exhaustion on that leader's face. This is the plane, the type of plane that Leo flew, F-105. This was flown over the north. Probably taken at Dak-To, a typical insert where the young GIs leave the helicopter.
And again, this is going to be
about 3/4 of an inch thick, and this would be in bronze. I think that's thematics. They and the Turner Joy. You know.
That was where
we saw the tubes up in Hanoi. This is a classic scene out of the Battle of Tet in Hue. That's a Marine tank that has evacuated the wounded.
And the women who served?
Yeah, 2 exhausted nurses after an all-night of operating. Good scene showing a black GI and a white GI together. Everybody was equal in that war.
I think our memorial has a nice cross-representation. I believe every ethnic race is noted somewhere on the memorial in one of the bronze pieces. Asian Americans, American Indians, Hispanics, blacks, whites, men and women.
It seems like politically the mood is tempered in this country now, too. We're making movies about the Vietnam experience, and no matter what people's politics were and how they feel about that war, or don't feel, this is something they can get behind. It's not political. It's simply an expression of love and gratitude.
It is not a political memorial at all. It simply is a remembrance of those who died, and in that remembrance we honor all who served. And that's it.
We decided as a commission that we would, one, defer to each other, all 7 members, on the final design, but we would not have a memorial that said never again or this was a waste. And we wanted something that California mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers could come and say, this is something that my son did, and it was an honorable thing. And we left 5,822 gentle heroes behind, and we want to say something about that. And they were good kids, and they did the best they could.
Well, to all of you, we wish you much good luck with the project. It is time to do something like that. Long past time, I'm sure you'd all agree. And KCRA is going to get behind a major campaign for the rest of this year to try to help put the drive over the top, to raise the final $1 million that'll be needed to put that memorial up in the Capitol grounds right by the Rose Garden, if you're in Sacramento, near the corner of 15th and L Street. But it is not going to replace the Rose Garden. The Rose Garden will stay. It simply will be set off in front of it. We hope that you'll consider joining this great crusade to say in a very special and a meaningful way, thank you for what you did, men and women of California. It is, in a way, a memorial for all, not just those who served, but everyone who cared, who had a connection with that time past in our nation's history. Please give, and thank you.